Welcome to Nature Calls. Thanks for joining us at the Nature Conservancy in Alabama. TNC Alabama is 20 conservationists working together to conserve the land and water for nature and people. I'm Jessica Mitchell, Philanthropy Program Associate with TNC Alabama, and this is Nature Calls, our virtual trip to share new projects and conservation-related work in Alabama each month on the second Thursday at 3 p.m. Before we start today's great program, let me share a few housekeeping items. One, we want to let you know that we are recording this Zoom program. And two, we're muting your microphone. And we ask that if you wish to comment, that you type your question or your comment into the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. This makes it easier for our presenters to manage the questions and answers at the end of their presentation. And speaking of, that presentation will be approximately 15 minutes long with another 15 minutes for questions and answers. And now I am pleased to introduce Mitch Reed, TNC's State Director, and Garrett Wallace, Government Relations Director for Alabama and Florida, who will tell us all about Alabama's conservation efforts and how your vote matters. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here, and we couldn't have timed this in this call for a better time because of the recent election. So, I mean, it's been a tough couple of years. A lot of division within our country, a lot of bipartisan or lack of partisanship, it seems, over the last several years. But I want to say that coming from my former role as government relations director and now at state director, I am convinced that what the lining of that, the silver lining on this cloud is that nature unites us. And that's been apparent throughout this entire process. Look at some really amazing accomplishments over the last couple of years. And the most significant probably has been the passing of the Great American Outdoors Act, which fully funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund and will provide a dedicated stream of funding of $900 million for land conservation in the U.S. from here on out. That has been something that the Nature Conservancy has been working on for decades. It always seemed like it was impossible, and it really took bringing both sides of the aisle and all people across the country together to work on that and find a solution that both the Democratic-controlled House and the Republicans in both the Senate and the presidency would get behind and sign. And so it is just absolutely true that when it comes to land conservation and protecting natural systems, there is a common thread that we can pull on. And that gives us a lot of hope into the future. Now there's change afoot. The new administration under President-elect Joe Biden is really going to bring, I think, several opportunities. There's obviously going to be a new direction on climate policy. There's also going to be a new focus on public lands and what it means for public lands and how we manage public lands. I think you're also going to see a course correction on environmental protection, particularly with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the EPA. We are, going to have to get in and work with this new administration and work with not only the highest levels of the administration, but also our new delegation here in Alabama to show them why protecting land here in Alabama is so important. And that brings me to my third point, and that is we are so incredibly fortunate to have Garrett Wallace working with us on this work. I've been a colleague of Garrett since I think Garrett was probably one of the first people I met when I went to the worldwide office as a new employee of TNC as the new director of external affairs. And I was like, why in the world do we have this professional lobbyist in here in the room? And it turns out that he was the government relations person for Florida and is so well positioned and so good at his job that when we had the opportunity to work with him for Alabama, I jumped at the opportunity. Garrett's going to talk a little bit about how we do the work, why we do the work, and give some examples of how that touches down in Alabama. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Garrett.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, y'all. I'm Garrett Wallace. I'm the Interim Government Relations Manager for Alabama. Been working in Florida environmental matters since about 1997. And in my various previous lives before TNC, I represented Everglades restoration in South Florida for the state of Florida for Congress. So when Mitch said he saw this guy going up there, it's just because I was weathered and beaten and been through way too many Congresses for my own good. And when I got a chance to help Alabama, it was a wonderful opportunity. Just as a quick aside, I've got a tremendous amount of family that range from Enterprise to Dothan, up towards the area of Eufaula, and my mother-in-law, who lives with us here in Tallahassee, was born in Hendry County. So we've got Henry County. I mispronounce it every time because we have a Hendry County in South Florida. And so the Alabama connection for me runs long and deep, and I'm happy to be able to talk with y'all today. So what we're going to do, and if you'll bear with me on the technology part of this while I share a PowerPoint presentation with you, if I am effective at sharing a PowerPoint presentation with y'all. We're going to talk a little bit about how to, there we go. Hopefully you all can see that by now. So how I hope that we can continue to work with our federal partners to better and advance conservation in the great state of Alabama. And as I'd mentioned, we talk a lot about how conservation is so critically important, but quite frankly, without sound policy from Congress, we aren't going to be able to affect the policy that leads to sound conservation. Mitch was kind enough to mention the Great American Outdoors Act. Well, I can assure you that without a doubt, without a pretty sound public policy in that arena, we would not have met with that amazing success that we've been trying to get to. Another thing that TNC brings to the table, which is respected just about from everybody that I run into, is that we lead with science, that we have sound data, and that we are solutions oriented and working from the ground up. And in my professional experience, all the great conservation efforts that we've ever achieved have started at the grassroots or local level. And by having that type of background and education, you can talk to members of the congressional delegation smartly, in an informed manner, concisely, and get them to what the point that we need them to feel and take this passionate perspective that we have to it. Something that I consider really important when we talk about policy, though, is that we are very timely in our discussions. And when I say that, a lot of people will typically ask a lot of folks who work with members of Congress. And so you've got a senator there who just may happen to chair the Appropriations Committee, who has an amazing amount of demands on his and his staff's time. We try to be very, very selective when we reach out to that particular office. And then when we do, we have a very clear, concise, and direct message that, to my next point, is feasible, that it is reasonable, it is balanced, and it is founded in good science and data. TNC is also pretty well renowned for bringing something to the table, whether it's money, whether it's expertise, whether it's sometimes just a simple cachet of TNC's name. That really helps make a policy stand strong. And then finally, I'm a big fan of leverage, because we are truly a nonprofit organization. And sadly, whether you consider this sad or not, money plays a game in politics, and we don't have any money to give to a campaign when it comes to actually trying to sway and influence a legislature. And our leverage comes from relationships that we have with a lot of federal agencies, a lot of expertise, and a lot of time on the ground. And so I've just highlighted a couple of partners that are so critical to what we do with the Corps, Interior, Fish and Wildlife, EPA. And then I just need to highlight briefly the Department of Agriculture. Every time I get a chance to talk to folks, I try to remind everybody that the largest single conservation funding strategy that the federal government has falls within the Farm Bill administered by the Department of Agriculture. And while it seems a little rushed to me to be talking about this, we're going to start working on the next Farm Bill And through the Farm Bill Conservation title, we find amazing ways across the country to put conservation easements, as an example, on property. In my experience, we want to get as much land in conservation as we can, but in many cases, that land is in an economically challenged county. So these easements, as an example, find a way to put conservation priorities on the land and allow it to be used for a compatible use, and then, quite frankly, keep that property on the local government tax rolls, which is a really important thing to do as well. So when TNC needs to talk about policy, we've got a very big, large, pardon my word, bureaucratic organization that TNC sometimes is. And so we've got to link a lot of people together. So I'm responsible for talking to the Alabama congressional delegation and making sure that they know what we need and what we stand for. And as a quick example, as Mitch mentioned, the election last week. Well, so far, every member of the Alabama delegation has either gotten a congratulations on getting reelected letter from us, or congratulations on getting elected, or we're going to miss you in the United States Senate. And if you decide to do something in conservation in your next phase of your life, please let us know. And that relationship development part is the most important part of any policy, external affairs, or lobbying effort, because we must simply continue to have that type of relationship with folks to be able to ask them to listen to our pitch, listen to the sound science and what we're trying to do. We also work to remain amazingly consistent, being proactive, and keep a finger on the pulse of what the next emerging issue might be. And so, I break it down into 5 different groups of people that I need to talk to on a regular basis, and that's members of Congress, their staffs, and other influencers, sometimes other lobbyists that are out there. Other environmental nonprofits, we need to know what other nonprofits are doing in this sphere so we can either reflect or react to the work that they're doing. Of course, talking to great TNC members and donors on calls like this. With the number of staff across the country with TNC, we've got to make sure that our communications to our employees are as clear and concise as we can be. And then to our trustees, which help guide and shape the policies that every chapter in the state has. Having that type of communications together is really critical. And so I'd mentioned relationship development. COVID has been a real challenge. I'll just say that for everybody in the whole wide world, and for lobbyists, it's been even trickier. We are very dedicated in actually taking elected officials out onto property to show them real life conservation in play. We haven't been able to do that. So the relationship development and having legislators out on our properties has not worked out as much as we would have liked. But rest assured, we'll get back to that again. I mentioned consistency again. That is consistent because I continue to say how important it is that we continue to stay on message. And then, of course, as I mentioned, finally, the consistency of communication. So Mitch asked me to share a little bit of an example of how we have to coordinate and develop relationships across the board. And so, it has been pretty clearly known for a while that we've got some problems on the Alabama River related to Army Corps structures that are out there that are negatively impact habitat. I think it's important that we acknowledge that some of the impacts of man had great intentions at the time, and as time marches on, we've proven to see some of the unintended consequences of us trying to control nature. And I believe on the Alabama River, Mitch, we can kind of agree that these locks were great at one time, but maybe now we need to look at some new alternatives. So one alternative for 2 particular structures on the Alabama River would be for the United States Army Corps of Engineers to construct fish passages around these 2 structures to allow fish to come up and down the river, provide a much stronger habitat for the system, and hopefully allow for expansion of these species. And with that comes along the opportunity for increased recreational economic impact. But while you might think it would be easy to try to get the Corps to do something, I'm here to tell you that that's sadly not the case. So we've got an idea. We need to talk to a lot of people about it and gain support. And that's what we're going to kind of continue to try to do. So We've met multiple times with a couple different layers of folks at the United States Army Corps of Engineers office in Mobile. We've been talking to Senator Shelby's office, and we've been talking to local stakeholders around Alabama for their thoughts and ideas on what this might need. And what it comes down to is the United States Army Corps of Engineers has a tool called the feasibility study that is used to examine the scientific analysis and basis for a navigation structure in this particular instance to help see what would need to be done. And we're going to be working with with Senator Shelby, the whole Alabama congressional delegation, the Corps, and state and local leaders to find and ensure that we have support to get the United States Army Corps of Engineers the authorization to conduct a field study to just look at whether this is needed or not, and if so, how would we advance? And I just kind of want to brag on us just a little bit. We've got such a strong relationship with the staff in Mobile, with the Corps as an example, because of our relationship development with those folks, that they think this is a great idea as well. And they've been giving us advice and suggestions and reviews how we could better accomplish the goal that they think is a great idea. And as a third party coming to the table with a sound scientific reputation, they're listening to us and letting them help. So that's just a quick example of some of the relationship development and government relations work that we have going on. And with that, Jessica, I think I will pause and turn it back over to you.
Sure. All right, so we do have a few questions. First is, does it actually do any good to contact my member of Congress? Do they really care?
Well, Mitch, if I may take that one, I think the most important thing that citizens of this nation should be doing is letting their members of Congress and their United States senators and their local and state elected officials know exactly what's important to them. And in this example, if you learn a little bit more about the Alabama River Project and you think it's a great thing, we'd love for folks to reach out to the entire congressional delegation of the great state of Alabama and tell them what an awesome thing they think this is. So in short, yes, tell your members what's important to you. They depend upon you for their vote, and they have an opportunity and an obligation to take your consideration. Thank you, Jessica.
Sure. Another question is, what can I do to help Congress understand the importance of conservation in Alabama?
Garrett, you mind if I jump in on?
Please, please.
One of the things that sort of in line with what Garrett mentioned about the Alabama River, when you have that interaction and you're out in the community talking your personal story about Alabama and why it matters to you and how you connect with it and how they can represent you by helping you along that journey and really plays a huge part. One of the pictures Garrett showed was Congressman Byrne talking to John Steiner down at one of our at the groundbreaking Lightning Point. Just a couple of months prior to that, we had an opportunity for Elizabeth Downing to come out and meet Congressman Byrne at the boat docks in Biola Battery. And so that building that relationship really created a situation where Congressman Byrne became a champion for us on the Gulf Coast and for conservation on the Gulf Coast. Even though, in some ways he really had to sort of buck his party. And so I think that's one way that I would answer that question, Garrett. You may have some other thoughts on that.
I think that's a perfect response, Mitch.
Okay. Is there any partnership between TNC and Conservation Alabama, maybe leveraging lobbying efforts?
So I've worked with Tammy Harrington and Conservation Alabama for a while now. We have partnered in many circumstances, mostly on the state side, and that's really where I focus my time on our GR work, and Garrett focuses on the federal work. Conservation Alabama is our official League of Conservation Voters. They are a 501c4, which is different than TNC, which is a 501c3, which those numbers matter an awful lot to the IRS because it determines how your donations are counted for tax purposes. And so the C3 and TNC, we're not allowed to take sides. In fact, we're forbidden to take sides. Conservation Alabama, as a C4, they actually exist in order to be able to receive conservations. And so they'll pick and choose, and they'll actually put questionnaires in front of people running for office and ask them just how you come down on an issue. Where we partner is on the policy piece. So for instance, Forever Wild is Alabama's signature land conservation program. And Forever Wild is a place where Conservation Alabama, TNC, and a whole host really of other conservation organizations around the state partnered together to protect not only the program, but also to accelerate sort of the recognition of conservation and conservation priorities in Alabama.
Okay. We have another one. It would help if you would send out a summary of what is important to convey to congresspersons about particular issues. Could you do this?
Absolutely, Jessica. I'll get you points tomorrow, and we can go from there. How does that sound?
Okay. I'm going to hold you to that. Does the incoming administration have goals and objectives that are important for Alabama?
Mitch, you want to go, or you want me to take that one?
Well, I think they do. I think that there's a couple of things that we've heard just in the beginning from the Biden administration. First is their commitment to climate science. I think that's critical for us and for where we're coming down TNC on attacking the challenge of climate change. The other piece, I think, is just a recognition that environmental protection is important not only for the health of our ecosystems, but also for the health of the people that exist around them. And we live this. I mean, the people who live down along Mobile Bay understand that we are directly connected to the health and welfare of our environment. And I think that that's somewhere that the Biden administration will probably find a central partnership with TNC. Garrett, you may have some insights into how we're going to engage with the administration.
Sure. So as of right now, TNC literally has 24 different memorandums completed that will go to 24 different federal agencies outlining where we feel they need to focus as their transitions evolve into a new administration at the Environmental Protection Agency or Department of Interior. And that work is well underway right now. And we have just recently seen the names of folks who are serving in transition capacities for the incoming administration. And so we're going through those names right now to see if we have relationships, know them, can call them on their cell, and do that part of the work. But the other part, which is more unfortunate, but it is part of our reality, and Mitch talked about the weather. I'm sitting here in Tallahassee, Florida, where the last spans of Tropical Storm Ada blew through here, 5:15, 6 o'clock this morning. So everybody was out of bed bright and early at my house this morning. But the unfortunate hurricane season that we're still enduring are going to be top of mind when it comes to actually talking about natural climate solutions and talking about adaptation and mitigation strategies, because over on Perdido Key, I read last week of a single house that has had 5 full-blown claims from the National Flood Insurance Program that have totaled $229,000. That little, what I would call a fish shack, where a lot of folks like me would go hang out when they were 18-year-olds and run around, is valued on Perdido Key of $144,000. And we've got to start looking at some of these realities of this and the fiscal responsibility that an organization like TNC can help bring to a discussion. Because let's find a way to help this couple that owns this house either build it to a different height so it's stronger, or simply get that land and just admit that this is a part of the world we can't build a house on anymore. And these situations are going to be real life examples that we're going to be able to walk into administration offices with and share this view, because it is right. And I think we can all probably acknowledge to some degree that the economy of this nation could use all the help it can get, and finding smart fiscal ways to mitigate some of the challenges climate change brings us is going to be something a lot of folks are going to be willing to listen to in the next administration, if I may say so myself. Sorry for getting too much down there on our path, but
no, I think that, but on that point, I think it's important that we highlight how TNC is also a conduit, maybe, between the different administrations and the work that we're doing.
Absolutely.
In the past administration, we worked and we're actually pretty successful in bringing in programs that looked at disaster mitigation up front. Like, how do you avoid disaster mitigation? How do you work with your state and federal emergency management areas to identify places that are at risk? And we'll be able to take those policy changes and move them into the new administration and provide those as examples that need to continue. And so, rather than have sort of fits and starts where there's administration and then you come up with a whole bunch of new ideas, one of the things that I think we bring to the table nationally is the ability to highlight those places that were working, those policies that were good ideas in the past administration, carry them forward to the Biden administration, and hopefully see them really hit their ground. Because I think there's a lot of good. We've spent a lot of time really trying to convince people like Bradley Byrne to support natural infrastructure and green infrastructure down along the coast. Now we have to go work with Congressman Carl to sort of show him why it was important and why it was important to Mr. Byrne. And I think TNC plays maybe a unique role in that space.
That's awesome. Thank you. I think we are getting kind of close to time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. But Mitch and Garrett, thank you so much. If our audience has any additional questions, you can always send about this particular project or work or any of our work. You can always email us at philanthropy.alabama@tnc.org. And speaking of, I want to wrap up by saying, no matter what's happening in the world, our work continues uninterrupted. Conservation never stops. We need your support to keep our conservationists in the field doing their important work for people and for nature. Please donate to the Nature Conservancy in Alabama. It's easy. You can send us a brief email at philanthropy.alabama@tnc.org, and we will reply with a link for online donations or guide you on sending your donation via postal mail. Thank you in advance for making a tax-deductible financial contribution, and invite someone to join you for the next nature calls. Just forward the invitation that you will receive in your email next month, or you can share their contact information with us and we will send that invitation on your behalf. And thank you very much for joining us for Nature Calls today.